Hi, good evening, everyone. I am Krishna, and I'm Programming Manager at the Map Academy. Thank you for joining us for today's event. Today's Map Academy Live is a little special as it's a collaborative program in association with Nauruzgan, one of our knowledge partners. Nauruzgan is an Iran-based research laboratory. And to those of you who are new here, I will quickly introduce you to what it is that the Map Academy does before I hand it over to Hali, who will then introduce us to Nauruzgan. So the Map Academy is an open access digital resource with a focus on art and cultural histories of South Asia. We have an encyclopedia of art, we have courses and image-led essays, as well as we do special projects, including curatorial work. Our online courses on textiles, craft, and history of South Asian, modern and contemporary Indian art, it's all available online, it's all freely accessible. The Map Academy Live is our monthly talk series where we curate expert-led talks at the intersection of art history, culture, research, and practice. And I shall hand it over to Hale now, who joins us from Iran to speak a little bit about the incredible work that Nauruzgan has been doing in the field of art and cultural studies. Over to you, Hale.
Thank you, Krishna, and good day, and thank you all for joining us. I'd like to welcome all of you on behalf of Nauruzgan Laboratory for the Study of the Persianate World. Nauruzgan is a collaborative, independent, Iran-based institute dedicated to the study of material and immaterial cultures across the Persianate world. We aim to explore the cultural connections that link our region, and we have been fortunate to collaborate with remarkable scholars and institutions whose contributions have enriched our work. Our partnership with MAP Academy reflects this commitment to cross-regional dialogue and shared inquiry. This collaboration now spans almost 2 years, during which we have worked together on several initiatives, including the Shared Histories series. We were also delighted to have MAP Academy participate in our Digital Humanities and Art History Conference in Tehran, which added meaningful depth to the conversations. In this spirit of continued collaboration, it's a pleasure today to welcome Dr. Reza Masoudi-Nejad, whose work speaks directly to these shared cultural and historical trajectories. His research shows how ideas, rituals, and customs move across regions and take on different cultural expressions, and today's talk is a compelling example of these connections. Thank you again for joining us. We look forward to the conversation ahead and to continuing this collaborative work with MAP Academy. Over to you, Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you. We are equally excited to be working with you and Nauruzgan. So without any further delay, let me introduce you to our speaker for today, who, as Hale mentioned, is a renowned multifaceted academic whose works transcend disciplinary boundaries, Dr. Reza Masoudi-Nejad. He is an urbanist with a background in architecture as well as urban morphology and anthropology. His research explores the spatial dimensions of collective action, religious rituals, urban violence, and the transformation of cities in Iran and India. He has held research positions at the Max Planck Institute of the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity, as well as in Göttingen and Zentrum Moderner Orient, Berlin. He's currently a research associate at SOAS University, London, and an academic visitor at St. Antony's College, University of Oxford. He completed his PhD at the Bartlett School of Architecture, University College London in 2009. Today, Dr. Reza will be talking to us about Muharram in Mumbai, its evolution over the last 2 centuries, its emergence as an urban ritual, and how it has deeply transformed the urban landscape and cosmopolitan order of the city of Mumbai. A few housekeeping notes before I hand it over to our speaker. The talk will be followed by a Q&A, and if you have any questions for Dr. Reza, you can drop them in the chat and we'll open it up for discussion towards the end. And please keep your cameras off and your mics on mute just to ensure a smooth experience. And also a quick reminder, this is a POSH compliant space and that the Art and Photography Foundation has strict policies against harassment. All right, hope you enjoy the session. Over to you, Dr. Reza.
All right, thank you very much, Krishna and Hala. I have to admit that I'm quite excited because this is the kind of first time for me to be hosted by Iranian and Indian kind of friends. So I'm particularly feeling be at home in that sense. And so today I'm trying to just give you a kind of introduction, I have to say, to Muharram in Mumbai. So what I'm going to try to do is just try to give you a brief background about Muharram in India, articulating again briefly, not extensively, about how the Muharram, or generally rituals, can be a part of urban studies, and discussing the notion of cosmopolitanism in Mumbai, and then to basically look at a few of historical events that changed Muharram ritual in Mumbai, because this is a huge topic, but I try to use a few examples to articulate my main argument, that is, how Muharram ritual was a part of urban process and cosmopolitan landscape of Mumbai, and how the ritual itself was changed through this process, because that was a part of urban negotiation. And another point that I'll probably have to mention is I have to emphasize that unlike most of my Iranian friends who study India, which particularly they focus on Iran when look at the Mumbai or India or wherever, I study Mumbai kind of as a native person. That was a part of my work, because when you work on ritual, you gradually became a part of the city and the community. So for me, I wasn't looking at India as a kind of lens to understand Iranian history or influence of Iran in India. Rather, I look at Muharram in India as a native person, I would call it. So purposely, I put that one to connect Iran and India. This is a shot I took in Dongri, the heart of old city of Mumbai, during my second or third field work. This is a parrot over Dongri area. And probably most of my Iranian friends would basically know that often in Iranian literature, classical literature, all the tales and stories are told by a parrot who's coming from India, because India was always the land of myth and stories and tales. So this is a kind of a tale that I want to try to go through. And let me see, how can I change? Okay. First thing first, Muharram rituals is basically an annual event to commemorate the tragic battle of Karbala in the day of Ashura, when the grandson of Prophet Muhammad was martyred, brutally killed with his basically companions. And so, although the ritual was practiced in Middle East particularly, as always when it was practiced, always indicated division between Sunni and Shia community. However, when the Muharram was spread through the Indian subcontinent, it's totally transformed, and it became a very different ritual, I would say. So in India, the Indian subcontinent, I would prefer to basically say, the Muharram never indicate the division between Sunni and Shias. Not only Sunnis and Shias, they participate in the ritual. Even the Hindu community, not all, but some of them, they engage with the ritual. The other aspect which makes it very different is, like in Middle East, across Middle East, from Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, I don't know, wherever, Bahrain and Iran, obviously, the Muharram time is just about mourn, basically. However, although always there is a kind of not purely mourn, but predominantly a mourning ritual. However, in India, it was quite different. So because the inter-community engagement, the ritual wasn't a soil or mere kind of mourn ritual. It was a very complex situation. So there was even a joyful aspect that, like, for example, in Mumbai, we have a historical document and narrative that talk about the drinking and dancing, as you can see in this amazing print from 19th century of Mumbai. But the two other things that I have to say is often in Iran, people, they assume, although the Iranian has a major contribution to develop Muharram ritual, especially during Safavid, and Safavid also, the establishment of Safavid dynasty has a major contribution to spread Shiaism to Mumbai, to India, sorry, and Indian subcontinent. However, we have to remember that there was a Shia dynasty even before Safavid in India. And the Muharram ritual has a really long history in India. Because of my work,
Sorry to interrupt. Could you make it full screen?
oh yeah,
The
sure.
PowerPoint? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. No, that's absolutely fine. So I'm going to explain 2 points here. So whenever I'm trying to explain how different was Muharram across Middle East to India, always I simply explain the term of Tazia. Tazia, interestingly, is used in all Arab contexts, Iranian contexts, and Indian subcontinent regarding the Muharram. So while in Tazia is in Arabic context like Lebanon and Iraq, it basically means commemoration. But in Iran, Tazia is referred to the passion play, a religious theater that basically replicate the tragedy of Karbala. However, when we are talking about India, Tazia is totally different things. It's a replica of the shrine of Imam Hussein that carried during procession, or as they call it in India, julus, immersing the Tazia in the seafront, or sometimes the riverside, or wherever there is no river or sea, the people, they buried the Tazia. But what this particularly shows that how even a terminology, a term like Tazia, has changed the meaning across geography of the Muharram ritual. So you can see how Hindu culture was infused into the Muharram ritual because of that basically practice. The other thing that I have to emphasize is that although Iranian contribute significantly on the development of the Muharram rituals, but that was Indian who spread extensively the Muharram geography across the world during colonial time. So this is another key, significant point that we have to bear in mind. And as I said, like, because my research has been so far predominantly focused on Mumbai, which doesn't have a long history, but recently I started digging out since when we have an inter-community basically participation in the Muharram ritual, and for how long this joy and mourn basically entwined during Muharram in Mumbai. And interestingly, I came across a really interesting book called Bahrul Asrar from somebody called Balkhi. The book is in Persian, but published in Pakistan, not in Iran. That's the travelogue is written during 1625. That's during Safavid. When the author visited Lahore, interestingly, his narrative clearly shows that the Hindu were being involved, but more strikingly, he explained the first 5 days of the 10 days of Muharram, because as most of you may know, the Muharram commemoration is mainly take place during the first 10 days of the month of Muharram. So he explained the first 5 days was celebration and joy, and it was justified because because the Imam Hussein in Karbala was involved with some wedding in the time of the tragedy. And then the second 5 days they involved with the more. So this shows that how far the Indian subcontinent has a very complex Muharram ritual landscape. So the other thing that I want to just talk about is, so I'm trying to go, and that's another part. This is the part that I try to show. The Muharram ritual was involved with the dancing and all kind of joyful and entertainment. So it wasn't just a more, although we have a joy aspect in Iran as well, but not in that scale. You can see people, they paint their body as a tiger and then do all kind of, street play, which was a crazy kind of situation, typical liminal situation or a carnivalesque situation that we explained. Probably I have to explain for my friends in Iran that although in Iran, lion often has a kind of Shia connotation referring to Ali, the first Imam, But in India, they often use the idea of babar or babr or tiger. So that's why here you can see people, they paint their body as a tiger, yeah. And so the reason that I focus on Muharram of Mumbai has a two particular point. First of all, Muharram ritual in Mumbai during 19th century, it was not only the only public event, annual event, it was the biggest festival or the ritual of the city during 19th century. So it was not just simply the Hindu and Sunnis and the Shia being involved, but that was a huge event. And the city, interestingly, even city was known for its Muharram during 19th century until when the Ganpati ritual or the Ganesh festival was reinvented, which I'm going to address. So another point that makes Mumbai's extremely important case study is the fact that Mumbai was was a city that has a major agency in Muslim, Shia, and Sufi schools and basically intellectual movements across the Muslim world, and has extremely interesting agency even to change some of has a major agency as a city to like the reform and transformation of some of the school of thought in Shiism even. For one of the cases, Aga Khan, I wish to be able to discuss that point, but because obviously we can't address everything. But my main point is the city of Mumbai itself as a social landscape has the agency for these change and transformation and reform. This is bring me to the point that often people talk about the history of cities and the city is the location and the place where the event happened. But in the new approach in urban history, what we call it urban history, we look at city as a player or as an agent of historical change. And I think Mumbai is a typical case study for that, to show how basically social landscape, negotiation among people, and all diverse people who arrive in Mumbai had a kind of extremely interesting interaction and leading to social change in their own identity and even the way that they taught. So that's why the city was extremely important as a case study. Now what I'm trying to explain, let me see, I'm not missing any point from now here. Yeah, okay. Sorry, sometimes I need to check my, Krishna, do we have a timer somewhere that I can see how long I talk?
I'm not sure about that, but
Okay.
we have a lot of time. I'll let you know if you're closer
Okay,
to.
sure. Because I want to just keep the balance between different sections. Let me turn on my timer. That helped me to. Okay. Okay. So one of the key point that I want to explain, as I said, the first of all, the Mumbai has an agency in historical change. But another reason that we look at the Muharram ritual in urban studies is all the rituals, not the Muharram ritual, never have a single function or definition. And if something has a very certain or sole function, I personally never call it rituals. This is a huge discussion on ritual studies, but often every ritual has a multiple meaning and multiple function. But one of the crucial points, based on my own experience and through Iranian history and Indian history of ritual, is interestingly, although like a ritual like Muharram ritual has what I call it religious religion agenda, but what is happening, because it's involved with the social negotiation, always the social agendas became a forefront of the ritual, while the religious agenda pushed back to the background. So if you look at the Muharram ritual, for example, in Iran or India, although it's about the commemoration of Muharram and Ashura tragedy, but you can see all the dynamics that they are unfold through the history. They are all about the social agendas and social negotiation. The other critical point for look at the rituals in urban studies is the fact that the rituals are a community-based, basically, practice. While the urban studies often look at the everyday life and what we call it class struggle, but the dynamic of ritual has never been involved with a class struggle or class definition. This is all about community. And therefore, the ritual always mediate the community negotiation in the cities. And this is extremely important because in urban studies, we often neglecting liminal time of ritual or community struggles or community negotiation and pay too much attention on class struggles and class negotiation in cities. This is one of the important points for why we have a look at the rituals as a part of urban studies. And that's why, as I said, like Muharram for me is not about religious practice, which is obviously the religious practice. But when you carefully look at the history of the Muharram ritual, both in Iran and in India, you can see this is an urban ritual. When I'm saying urban ritual means a ritual that mediates negotiation among different communities in the city. So this is another point that I have to, just as a kind of basic point for. Another point that I have to explain before moving directly to discussion of Muharram ritual is the complexity of Mumbai social landscape. It is very common that people talk about the Mumbai cosmopolitanism, and it is often romanticized. So they talk about the Mumbai during 19th century, like the city was it was a melting pot, and everything was fun, everything was glory and rosy, which obviously we know is not the case. So in order to understand the urban landscape or social landscape of Mumbai, we have to consider a very complex system, which some of historians rightly talk about. The Mumbai cosmopolitanism was actually the result of capitalist cosmopolitanism. That means, what it means is basically there was a collaboration and partnership between different communities in Mumbai, like among Muslim, the Parsis, even the Brits. So in Mumbai, unlike many other colonial cities, the commerce and merchant basically activity never was dominant by Brits. Obviously, the Parsi were being involved seriously, but for example, Parsi, they have Muslim partners. So there was a kind of very interesting situation. But as far as I know, I'm not specialized in the economic history, but as far as I study, based on the other scholarship, is this was a unique somehow, and even different from Calcutta. Some of colleagues here may just correct me if it's not that's the case. But generally, the cosmopolitanism of Mumbai was the result of economic, or let's say capitalist cosmopolitanism. The other point is the city became a cosmopolis, meaning that people pouring into the city, migrating to the city from all over the place, from all over the Indian subcontinent, all over the Indian Ocean and Iranian plateau. So imagine the city was 30,000 people in late 19th century, 18th century, and during 19th century became a city of 1 million people within a very short period of time. So suddenly we have so many different people arriving in Mumbai, encountering with other people. And what has happened, although people, they may assume this was a melting pot, but that was not the case. Because, for example, the city was housing the most diverse Shia community around the world. We didn't have any city like that. So every single school of Shiism has a kind of community in the city. And the diversity of the Shia community, for example, it wasn't just about the Shia communities, that's all over, like the other Muslim and other communities. They've been extremely, basically diverse. So, like, for example, there was Iranian, there was the Khojas, there was Boras, and there was the Shias from the other part of India. And interestingly, not all the Khojas been Shia Muslim. Some of them been Sunni, some of them was Nazari Ismaili, some of them were the Snashari. So you can see how, for example, the diversity was based on religious diversity multiplied by ethnic diversity. So for example, some of the Khojas have more innotation, basically more intimacy with the Iranian who been the Snashari than the other communities. So it became extremely a kind of interesting fabric. But in one of my paper published, I think 2012, I explained, but this is not, neither was a melting pot nor a fragmented society. So what I articulated or formulated as a fractal society. So the reason that I use the fractal, I try to use a kind of a model to still admit there was a cohesion among these communities. However, none of them, they lose their own identity in that context. So the fractal system is, when you look at the fractal geometry, for example, or fractal system, you will see a whole system. However, if you look at it closely, you will see every segment of that has own structure and own separate identity. And that was a typical situation in Mumbai. So the Khojas never been melted down to Iranians or the Boras. So everybody keep their own separate identity while being participating and or part of a much bigger system. When I developed that idea, obviously based on my own field work and historical, basically, examination, at the end I thought, oh, probably I'm going too far. This is too postmodern. Was it people actually been basically aware of that complex system of fractality? Interestingly, I came across an article or a letter in Times of Bombay by somebody called Rauf ad-Din Ahmad. And the letter and the article was published in Times of Bombay as a challenge for the colonial, basically, regulation against on Muharram. They explained that, what he explained in that letter, he says, basically, there is no such thing called Muslim community. We are so many different groups, and each of us, we keep our own separate customs, dress, and identity. This is extremely important. So that's my key point. And here is the point. Then, because Muharram was the biggest and the most important festival, everybody used the Muharram to practice this fractal identity. The reason was that what makes it very interesting there is, although many people, for example, Iranian assume they are Shia, right? They arrive in Mumbai, they face with many other Shias. So this is a typical situation that the identity and idea of the self-identity will be redefined based on to whom we are in contact with. So everybody who arrive in Mumbai, facing with the other Shia and other Muslim, they have to redefine their own identity and against other. And the Muharram played a significant role on that. So everybody used Muharram to redefine their own identity. Through that process, they keep changing the Muharram as well. And so based on that, I'm trying to now, let me explain this point, because I'll talk about this complex identity point. For example, Iranian Shia community in Mumbai, never been called Iranians in Mumbai. They called them Mughal. And the reason was, I explained it in the book chapter, because this is really interesting situation. Because there were so many different Iranians in Mumbai, including the Parsis, who are Zoroastrian, elite community who kind of dominate even the basically financial landscape of Mumbai. Then there was another Zoroastrian community coming to Mumbai during 19th century from the center of Iran, but because they've been poor peasant from rural area, although being invited by the Parsis, but because of the social differences, they never kind of been accepted as a part of the Parsi community. The other reason was the Parsi obviously forgot the Persian language. They're speaking Gujarati, and the new Iranians or arrive in Mumbai, they speak Farsi, right? They are in different social class. So in Mumbai, they called that group Irani. And if you heard of the Irani cafe, is associated with this community. But obviously the Isna Ashari were there as well. So what they did in Mumbai, they invent the title of Mughal for this community because they were Muslim, they were speak Parsi, speak Persian, which was the court language of the Mughal Empire. So they reinvent that term for Iranian Isna Ashari Muslim to distinguish them from Parsis and Iranis. So, and even if you go to Mumbai asking where is the Iranian mosque, nobody knows where is that place, but you have to ask where is Mughal Masjid. So this is a complexity of this fractal system. So let me now move on. What I'm trying to do now, I try to explain that how basically this Muharram was organized in the city, and particularly I want to address the point that how non-Muslim and non-Shia were involved with the ritual. The problem that I have, although many basically people, they keep saying, okay, everybody was involved with the Muharram ritual, but basically always I'm questioning everything. So what I tried to do, I went through a large number of historical documents and historical maps to test that point, which I'm trying to show now. Krishna, is there any question now? Because I'm going to moving on to the main part of the presentation.
No, we're good. Could you make full screen again?
Yeah, I'm going to go to full screen again. Yeah. So
Sure,
this is Mumbai. Mumbai, early 19th century. And some of you may know that basically even in historical texts, they often talk about Mumbai or Bombay islands, because Mumbai was a group of islands, but they gradually reclaimed the land. These basically islands joined together. Still here, you can see the main part of Mumbai was separate from the north part. Can you see my pointer? Krishna, can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see here, actually here is just an island, right? But today, if you go to Mumbai, this is connected to the northern part. This is Mahim Bay, for those who know Mumbai, and that's the Back Bay. So the city was divided in two parts. One part was called the fort, which is here. That was a colonial and administrative part of the city, and some of the company, they have office, and European mainly living that part of the city. And the second part, which was called native town, which was the main part of Mumbai, and obviously some of elite often live in the villas and the houses, Bangalore, in suburb of the city, in more kind of garden part of the city. So this is the fort. As I said, this is 1855. But what I'm going to try to focus is that part, which is native town. Sorry, because the way that they designed that maps, the north is not towards the top, so you can see the north. So north is that side. So what I did with this map, often, even in architectural studies, we often look at the map not seriously, but I try to investigate the map more carefully. What I did, luckily, here you can see all of the mosque, church, and the fire temple, which is the Zoroastrian temples, and Hindu temples being basically shows in the map. And even he's interestingly here, I don't know why, because always we have to ask why certain things shown in the map in such a way, which is interesting because the mosque was in the top of the list, which is interesting. And I have to explain that Mumbai population, Muslim community in Mumbai was 10% of population during 19th century. Even today is considered as a 10%. So what I did here, you can see, I'll just start with the churches. Obviously, churches being mainly associated with the missionary groups, and some obviously the colonial, some of them being associated with the Scottish, or some of them with Irish, but this is the distribution of the church in the city. Churches in the city, we are just all over the place, mainly in the suburb. That's the key point. And this is fire temples. And some of the most important was here, because these are actually not all temples, I have to say, because this is religious places, because this is a Dakma. or dogma, or dakhma, as we in modern Persian we say. But this is the distribution of the fire temple, the Parsi community. And here is Hindu temples, and these are the mosques, which is quite interesting because, first of all, the number of these mosques is just huge for 10% of the population. But what is indicating is the fact that the Muslim, they've been so diverse, and every single community has their own mosque. That's the part of the reason we have so many mosques in the city. So this is the general landscape. You can see the city was kind of divided between, I would say, mainly because the Hindu and the Muslim, they've been the main group. So you can see the spatial or segregation among them. But to understand the situation of Muharram, what I did on another map, I can just put all the mosques on the map, and I went through large number of police reports because, interestingly, during Muharram in 19th century, the colonial authority issued license for Muharram ritual, and the license has been divided for what is called tabut, panja, and so the tabut is obviously coffin. That's a symbolic coffin that people carry during Muharram, and the panja is the pole, which is often associated with alam or the flag. So what is interesting here, I basically divided all based on the police report that I collect, shows the number of licenses that they issue for each part of the city. What I did, in order to see it better, I just put it in the larger, so you can see better here. So you can see in each ward, and it's interestingly, even today, we use these wards of A, B, C, and the borders still today is like that. Obviously, the number of wards in Mumbai is just much more than this, right? So if you look at the number of licenses that have been issued, particularly look at those areas that they have 0 mosque. So the ward A, ward D, and ward F and G, which is the north part of this part. But the main point is, we have quite number of licenses for the area that was no mosque in them, right? Or even for the area that they have very few mosques, and still we have large number of licenses. This is particularly shows these license was issued for the Hindu community. So there is no mosque in the area, but the Hindu, they got the license to participate in the ritual. And that's a very clear indication how much they've been involved with the ritual. And what else that I've done, I started reading huge number of police reports during 19th century, and that's the data that I collect and map the procession route during Muharram in Mumbai. So basically, the procession of Muharram, there have been 2 parts. One called Tulis, Tulis basically is like a hayat in Persian. So each community or each neighborhood has their own group of men, basically, running the procession in different parts of the city, challenging the other community during first 10 days of Muharram. But final procession, which was the most important procession, and it was called Tabut procession, and that was the route. I have to admit, although a large number of police reports suggest this route, but I can see, I find some historical evidence that sometimes the procession was end to the back way, which was here. So that's the very general kind of, I would say, arrangement of the ritual during 19th century. So now I'm going to go through a few historical events that they are extremely important for Muharram. I'm not going to go through all the basically historical events that changed the Muharram landscape, but I'm going to go through a few examples that basically shows the situation. So one of the key points that I have to mention, this is important for the history of city, the time when the wall of the fort was removed, because the city became getting bigger and bigger, and then the space was basically limited, though then they decided to remove the wall in 1862. That was the beginning that the 2 parts started basically merging, melting to each other. So that was a kind of open up the administrative and colonial part of the city into to the actual city. Oh, by the way, I have to mention again here, let me go back. And that's interestingly, even for the Ward A, which was basically the colonial part of the city, still we have some license here. And yeah, what is happening here, because the fort was open, so before that time, it seemed, as our historical narrative shows, that the Tulis procession that happened in the first few days of Muharram, which was actually very tense and challenging, because every committee, they want to emphasize on their own authority, so they're pushing each other, let's call it, or challenging each other. So it was a very tense situation. So the fort was basically not the part of this landscape. When the wall was removed, obviously it seems the historical record shows that the Tulis procession, they go through the fort as well. So what was happened, the very first Muharram regulation was issued in 1871, where they actually abandoned entering the processions into the fort, which is quite interesting. And it shows how the negotiation between authority and the community start built up over the time. And probably that's a good point to mention. You know, the Muharram ritual, as I said before, that was a part of urban negotiation among the communities. But this negotiation was not just among those who participating in ritual, also those who are being outside of the ritual, like Parsis. And obviously all these things was involved with the colonial authority as well, because they have to get the permission, and was always negotiation. And so this is as I said, this is the very first regulation. And because the population became much larger, and the ritual became quite significant, and we could see some articles and letters in newspapers start, basically claiming, okay, this ritual, and mainly often they coming from the Parsis. They start saying, okay, this is an annoying ritual, all sorts of things, and they start claiming, oh, this is a very violent situation. But interesting, which was actually, I mean, we have to admit that obviously the rituals always involved with tension and violence. But this is a liminal situation, and the tension and even violence during ritual are fundamentally different from everyday violence. So we have to distinguish these two. But my point is here, although there was a tension and clash between different community, and some people, they want to use or abuse this situation to push the ritual back from the city landscape, there are enough historical evidence. For example, one article I found in 1879, published in Times of Bombay, was quite interesting argument. They said, like, the number of casualty during Muharram in Mumbai was less than the casualty during the Lord Mayor of London shows, which is still practice actually today in London. So this is quite interesting. You could see how much negotiation happened even in newspapers. So everybody want to just, discuss, is it that the ritual should be in the city or not? So this is a kind of typical situation. And another point that I have to say here, probably that's a good time to note it, and the negotiation among those who've been involved directly to the ritual, quite interesting. As I said before, the Muharram ritual wasn't just about the Shia or Muslim, the Hindu were involved. But what is fascinating here, within those communities who involved with the ritual, that was the Sunni community who claimed the authority over the ritual. So initially, the Konkanis community dominate the ritual. And interestingly, when even Iranian, they want to start running their own new ritual in Mumbai called horse procession, which is what we call it in Iran, like Shabi, running a kind of a passion street play, I would call it. So because the Iranian, they gain the number of people, they want to be more presence in the city during Muharram. So what would happen, the Konkanis who claim the authority over the ritual, they make a case against Iranian in the court, stopping and banning the Iranian procession, horse procession, I would call it, not the procession. So you can see how, and gradually the community who dominate the ritual change over the time. And this is fascinating because initially that was the Konkanis, then the Memons, and keep this dominant community keep changing that because as a part of this constant, basically, negotiation. One of extremely important event in history of Mumbai and the history of Muharram ritual is what is the colonial authority called it the riot, 1893 riot. That was extremely violent situation and was inflamed during Muharram ritual. That was typical, and there are a large number of police report on this issue. Fascinating situation, but that was, I have to say, like, I can't go through the detail obviously here, but it shows how the colonial authority, they didn't want to involve the communities to solve the issue, but they always want to impose their own authority over the city. So the riot, as they call it, end up to a major new regulation issued in 95, sorry. And that was a regulation that exclude the Hindus from the Muharram ritual. So the regulation announced, and they say we no longer issue license for the Hindu communities. So they are not a part of the ritual anymore. But what was happened is quite fascinating, because as I mentioned earlier, the Muharram ritual was the biggest and the only public festival and ritual in the city. That's why everybody used it to negotiate their position in the city. What was happened, suddenly the Hindu communities who didn't have a ritual as a public ritual that, get the city and suspend the everyday life situation, they became empty-handed. And what was happened, right after that, that was the time that Tilak actually reinvented Ganpati festival. And I'm sure those Indian friends, they know well about Tilak, but for my Iranian friends, I would say he was the godfather of the Hindu nationalism. Extremely interesting person, extremely clever, and unlike Gandhi, that Iranian always, because in Iran always the struggle for independence is associated with Gandhi and nonviolent movement. But Tilak was one of the most significant figures in the whole, anti-colonial movement, who actually praised violence even. So this is a very different approach that he promotes all the time. What was happened, Tilak had an idea and always says, well, we are not only should challenge the colonial and the British colonial power, we have to challenge the old colonial power who were Muslims. So what was happened, Tilak used the situation to reinvent Ganpati festival. But what is interesting, some of my Indian friends, they may know that the Ganpati or Ganesh festival was a family event. It wasn't a public event like a community or a neighborhood running the festival or ritual, right? So it was even mostly associated with the elite group who bring their Ganesh as a family and sink it in the riverside or the seafront. So it was a kind of family event for the elite Hindu communities. If I want to explain like it for Iranian friends, that was like a Sizdah Bedar. See, like Sizdah Bedar, we bring our sabze to the suburb or the field or leave it in the river. But this is not a community event. This, you bring your own, with the family, you bring your sabze to the river, right? So this is a kind of very intimate family event. And that was the case about the Ganesh festival. So people, they bring their own Ganesh during 10 days of the ritual festival time. But what Tilak suggested, and he basically initiate that movement, he says instead of over the 10 days, we're going to do that right at the end of the 10th day, which is quite interesting because it's basically resembles the idea of Ashura, which is the 10th of Muharram, right? But what he says, instead of the family event, every community, you have to have their own group of people, have their own Ganesh and running the procession and being in the city, like negotiating their position. And what is even more interesting, when I was reviewing Edwardes' narrative, and I'm sure most of my Indian friends, again, they know Edwardes. Edwardes was the police commissioner of the Bombay, an extremely interesting figure. And he was a kind of anthropologist as well. He has multiple books about Mumbai, one of them which is fascinating called By the Way of Bombay. And in that particular book, he discussed that situation. And he says, Tilak actually got the idea of Ganesh festival and reinvented Ganesh based on the Muharram ritual. But what is interesting here, is the Muharram ritual in India was itself got idea from the Hindu idea of to run the procession toward the seafront or river, as because the whole idea of the procession on the Ashura days is that a symbolic funeral, right? You can see how Hindu idea, Hindu culture was infused into the Muharram ritual. But now Tilak actually got the idea of basically, let's call it borrow the idea of the Muharram ritual and use it to give power to the Hindu community in the context of Mumbai. But then, as we know now, Mumbai, like during 19th century, and this is obviously my Indian friends, they know well about the Ganesh festival. For just my friends in Iran, Ganpati festival is the biggest intercity festival in the world in Mumbai. And interestingly, while Mumbai was known for its Muharram ritual, obviously after that kind of regulation, gradually it was Ganpati or Ganesh festival that became the symbol of the city, or let's say the city became known for that, right? So that's one of really interesting the kind of example to see how this negotiation was a part of the process of the changing the rituals and social landscape of the city. Another regulation which was extremely important was a regulation was issued during 1912. That was actually the time of Edwardes. Interestingly, the regulation wasn't ban the ritual, but make a condition in a way that all the Muslims refused to apply for the license. So what was happening after that, practically, the Muharram procession was a stop in the city. And in that sense, what was happened, only the majlises or the more gathering or assembly in the Shia community place was remained because there was no need to license, but the procession was a stop from the city. So you can see gradually we excluded the Hindus, and then because of the procession was a stop, gradually the Sunnis was also excluded kind of from this ritual landscape, and the ritual was limited to the assembly in the Shia places, associated often to Iranians or the Khojas and the Bora community. But what is interesting is let's say the complex system of how people actually preserve the Muharram in Mumbai and then revive it. And I have a chapter on this explaining how what I call it urban margin means both the spatial margin of the city and the community was being marginalized before. Like, because here that's the first case. When the Muharram was abandoned, Muharram procession was abandoned in Bombay, what the Shia community did, they started running the procession in Bandra. For those friends who know the city, this is Mahim Bay, and this is Bandra, where actually gradually some of Muslim and particularly Shia community moving from the old part of the city to Bandra, late 19th century and early 20th century gradually. So this is one of the areas that the Shia community, especially the Khojas and Iranians, being concentrated. So what was happened when the ritual was a stop in the city, they started running procession in Bandra. Interestingly, the reason was the Bandra by the time was outside of the territory of the governor of Bombay. So they couldn't impose the regulation to the Bandra. So they start running the procession there. And I would say they preserve it there gradually. And obviously over the time getting bigger and bigger until gradually now the Iranian became the major player for the Muharram. Gradually the Iranian community start kind of reviving the ritual in the city. Let me move to that point. So this is the Iranian mosque, or better known as Mughal Masjid. And the Mughal Masjid became a heart of the basically performing Muharram ritual, and then later on became a very important center, even when the ritual was revived, the procession, I mean. So what was happened, just give you a few examples here. So this is a extremely unusual mosque. I have to say this is built during mid-19th century by an Iranian Shirazi merchant, inviting a Shirazi architect to build the mosque. But this particularly unusual mosque because I call it a garden mosque, which is unique. I have finished a book on the mosque. Hopefully, I'm not sure when will be published, but hopefully when it's out, you can just go through that book with the history of the mosque and its significance. So as you can see, this is not a typical mosque. It is a very garden mosque and resembling actually the feeling of Shiraz, I have to say. So just a quick point. Okay. Here is the heart of the old city of Bombay. So you can see here the whole city almost, and this is Dongri area of the old city. And these basically places that are located, assigned, these are the Shia community centers, basically. Most of them actually established by Iranian, although some of them are the Hoja's place and some of them, changed their association. But what Iranian did, fascinatingly, when the Muharram was stopped, the procession, what they did, they have majlises in different places associated with them. So like in Imambara, or as we call it in Iran, Husseinias, and the mosque, what they did, they have majlis in different places. What they did, they attend in one majlis, and then when majlis was finished, they started walking all together to the second place, and then third place. As they even call it in oral history, they say we have a silent procession. And this silent procession was between this Imambara, and then the Shushtari Imambara, and then that's the Iranian mosque, and that's Amin Imambara. So they start running this silent procession, and then gradually, that was, I would say, during 1940s. Then gradually it became actual procession. And what was happened later on, that after independency, the Shia community, the number of Shia community, basically population increase in the city. Mainly they're coming from Hyderabad and UP. And as my Indian friends, they know, that was a part of the reason was as a result of the abolishing of zamindari. Zamindari, although probably my Iranian friends, they may assume this means the land ownership, but in India it means something like, I would say, tuyuldari. So this was an elite kind of class who managing the lands and running the agriculture. So when they lose their position, and they have no, let's say, things to do in their own homeland, they're moving to India as a new home. So gradually the Shia community became bigger and gained the confidence. And that small route that I put it in red became the first route of the reviving of the procession. And here is quite interesting. While Iranian, they used to be a margin group of in the Muharram ritual, became the significant community of organizing the Muharram ritual. And then gradually, over the time, during 60s, these procession expanded. Now, this initial procession here, which was here, expanded from the, what we call it, Honda Corner in Mumbai. Hopefully some friends from Mumbai are here. So they're running the procession here in Tasu'a night. And then on Ashura Day, they're all coming from all over the old city, going through not the seafront anymore, go to Iranian cemetery in Mazgan. That's quite interesting. You can see gradually the Muharram ritual, while it was an inter-community event, gradually shift and change, and losing this inter-community dimension became extremely associated with Iranian. Even, interestingly, Iranian community, they are not attending in this Ashura Day towards the Iranian cemetery. They want to keep their own separate identity, as I explained initially, although they are all involved with the Muharram ritual, but they're not going to melt down to the other. So although Iranian be extremely basically respected, and they know as the most important community of the Shia now in Mumbai, but they are not joining collectively, I have to say. No, I mean, individually they join the procession, but collectively they stay and kick in their own small procession. But interestingly, even that major procession end up to Iranian cemetery, respecting kind of Iranian community and admitting the significance of Iranian community. And so you can see gradually it is no longer toward the seafront. It's became a more Shia kind of rituals. And another example that, the another thing is obviously Iranian, they have own basically the horse procession that was abandoned during 19th century, they gradually revive it on that time. So they have Tazia and then the horse procession, all sort of thing. What is interesting here, the Tazia they're running, they play by Iranian, but watch by Indian. And interestingly, even here, some of Indian friends they may recognize. This is Imam Hussein, and this is obviously Shem fighting in Amin Mambara within a huge crowd, and then keep walking between these horse and the whole group that they play the Tazia. They're moving between different Mambara within the neighborhood. So quite interestingly for me, I remember when I was attending the ritual, they keep saying, Dr. Ali, Dr. Ali. And I said, who's Dr. Ali? He said the Imam Hussein. And I realized this is a well-known figure in India because he was a physiotherapist of cricket team, national cricket team. So he was extremely respected individual who play Imam Hussein, which is quite interestingly. They know, the cricket team in India, obviously is a big deal, right? So, and the other thing that I want to mention, as I said, every community although they're participating and they are a part of the ritual collectively, but they keep their own separate identity. Here is the example. This is a Bora community. I will show you some image to see how differently, even visually, their place during Muharram is different. So this is the what we call it in the heart of the Dongri. This is Jail Road. So when Muharram started, with the whole city landscape would be changed. So you can see the flags. There are people, they start building tiny things, basically associating with the Muharram event because this is water. This is Muhammad Ali Road. The shops actually changed. The vendor they arrived. Everything is changed. So like all these shop here, they are selling blade because of they being used for the flagellation. Even the business of these shops in heart of Dongri is changed. And the people, they built kind of symbolic things. That's the typical landscape. The older road became a kitchen place. The procession happened. You can see this, or even the color. And this is a typical situation. There's chest beating during procession. There's Iranian community of the Boucherie. Still played Dammam during Muharram. But what I'm saying, even the rooftops would be changed as a place for the Muharram ritual. This is, again, that's the heart of Dongri. But you can see this is visually different because this is belong to the Bora community who are coming from Gujarat, and they are Ismailis. And I mean, I have to say the Boras are Ismailis, but they are not following Agha Khan. They are called even they themselves, they not call them the Ismaili, they call themselves the Dawoodi Bora because they are, theologically, they follow the Shia school of Ismaili Musta'ali, but they are not using that kind of terminology. But what they do, although they're part of the ritual, they have extremely exclusive ritual. And so even visually, they distinguish their situation. This is the Bora Mohalla. Sadly, you can't see that landscape anymore because of the gentrification and the major development in the area. The picture is taken during my second fieldwork in 2010 or 11. So this is this is Bendi Bazaar, the heart of the Bora Mohalla, very busy area. But then suddenly during Muharram became like this. What I'm trying to show you here, you can see that the crowd are gathering here to have a chance to see their own spiritual leader. But what you can see here, you can see the ladies on the front with their own usual the Bora dress, and the back you can see these men with all the white dress. You can see a man here like a typical Bora dress. Although such a huge crowd happened and dominate the entire area, but no outsider, when I'm saying outsider means the Bora, are allowed to join this crowd. So they have very exclusive ritual, and even more interestingly, in order to distinguish their own identity from the other Shias, they are actually using a different calendar. They use ancient Egyptian lunar calendar in which the Ashura day will be calculated differently. So on that year, the Ashura day for them was 1 day earlier than the rest of Shia community. Lucky me, because I was able to join the Ashura day twice in one fieldwork. But what my point is here, that every community, they play with tiny things, fine-tuning the ritual to distinguish their own identity and negotiate their identity with the other communities. This is that's the final case that I want to show. This is not just about, as I said, the Muharram ritual became urban ritual, used by everybody to negotiate their position in the city. And interestingly, while, as I explained so far, we see gradually inter-community ritual was like the Hindu were excluded. Then the Sunni will move out somehow. But then interestingly, more recent year, we can see the Wahhabis were involved with the Muharram ritual. For the Iranian who knows Wahhabis, they probably is a shocking point, right? Because Wahhabis are always against all kind of things that Shia do, and the Wahhabi in Mumbai also, they do that. I mean, they're all totally against the Shia community. They want to stop the Shia rituals. But what is interesting, these Wahhabi, when I'm saying Wahhabis, I'm not referring to all the missionary or the movement. This is the Wahhabi means that an Indian Muslim group, mostly coming back from like the Saudi or Dubai, I would say we attract by Wahhabi idea. When they return back to India, they are mostly the community that I'm referring. They are living in the old city of Bombay, rather poor community, but they want to negotiate their position in the city. What they did, obviously, they have no rituals, right? They start using Muharram as an excuse to basically practice their own kind of position in the city. And what is happening here, you can see the police, they put the gates here, and you can see the very different banners through this road because they want to claim that road as a part of the Wahhabis and pushing back the Shia community and Shia rituals from that part. I remember I was walking around the town because I tried to capture the landscape during Muharram. And obviously I dressed like a local, so I've been meltdown within the community. So when I'm walking, I want to go through that alley, and then one of these police officers stopped me because he realized I'm a Shia, right? Obviously I'm not a religious person per se, but like obviously dressed like a Shia. And so he said, no, you can't get in. And I said, why? And then I realized, whoa, the banners has nothing to do with the Shias. And I realized this is a territory that the Wahhabis claim it. So they're pushing back the other. And the point is, we have no historical or religious event during Muharram based on Islamic tradition, as the Wahhabis often would claim. So what they did, and this is the very small mosque in Dongri area. I will show you this location, which is like a kind of open space at the end of Jail Road. But those who are from Mumbai, you know, like this is just on the right side is the jail actually, because the jail is still there, right? So what they did, this is a mosque. They claim this picture is taken during normal situation before Muharram. But what they do, they claim that place for their own assembly, and they have all kind of banner, obviously even use the red color to distinguish it from the Shia. And people, I'm sure that my friends, they know, the Iranian friends or the Muslim friends, within the landscape of Muharram, the red color is associated with the Shem, the enemy of Imam Hussein. And then what they did, they started using, on that year when I was doing my field work, the Muharram was at almost the time of the Christmas as well. So, but obviously Muharram is the first month of the year in the lunar calendar. They call it like the Happy New Year and that sort of thing. Obviously, we have no such thing in Islamic culture and tradition to celebrate the new year, the new lunar calendar. There's no such thing at all. But they want to use the opportunity for negotiation. And as again, this is the Dongri area, and all these places are associated with the Shia. Therefore, during Muharram time, there was lots of procession between these places. And what they did, the Wahhabis, that's a jail, and this is Jail Road. And for those who know some from Mumbai, this is Muhammad Ali Road. So the procession is happening all over the place. So what they did, they claimed this part, which is actually in the middle of lots of processions. So they want to interrupt the Shia procession, and that's during Muharram. So a huge crowd happening here, and then you can see like it will be difficult this is a taboot, they carry during procession. This is obviously the small procession during Muharram, not the Ashura day. So this is a way that they try to negotiate their position within the city and claim the authority over the certain part of the city. Getting to conclude my talk, and is basically what I try to show here, that the Muharram processions and Muharram ritual generally produce a space for negotiation in the city, right? And it's a part of the historical dynamic of the city. What is happening, a typical ritual is actually entwined things that they are, seems to be paradoxical. First of all, as I explained at the beginning, the Muharram ritual was about kind of joy and drink and all kind of things. So even the comical situation. So he entwined the serious and more with the comical and joy. The other thing is basically, we can see how religious agenda and basically social and urban negotiation are being also entwined. And final case study that I shows is actually, this is one of my latest publications that I explained the Muharram in Mumbai is not just ritual, is also a part of that. If I look at it, the Mumbai Muharram as an urban ritual, it is including the Muharram ritual and its counter ritual. So you can see how paradoxical things they actually entwine in the ritual, and that's the nature of all the ritual, to see things that they are supposed to be against each other, or basically incompatible with each other in everyday situation, but they became kind of a part of this larger system. And that's why I call the Muharram ritual, or all ritual, as a topological system. What that means, the topological is, this is a very simple topological system, basically shape. So if you get a stripe, twist one side, and then attach it, you can walk around. In normal, let's say, loop, each side of the loop will be separate, right? But in that topological loop, you can walk on that surface and actually walking on the both side of the loop. So you simultaneously you're in the both side, right? And if I want to capture the idea of the Muharram, because it's not that simple, I just use my calligraphy and I put it in the topological ring, explaining how complex would be the situation. Everything became fuzzy, like the text can't be read, because this is typical ritual situation. You can't simplify things in the Muharram. So they are very complex, very entwined, and sometimes confusing even. Rest my case. Thank you very much for your time. Stop the share. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a wonderfully insightful presentation. The archival maps were particularly helpful for us to sort of visualize this huge morphing that's happened in the society, as well as tangibly in the landscapes. We have a bunch of questions already, so maybe we can quickly take them. We are slightly over time, but there are 3 questions, so I'll just quickly read them out. How do informal urban actors, such as local organizations, neighborhood leaders, procession committees, shape the geography and politics of Muharram differently from municipal or state authorities?
Well, the thing is, like, I assume they're asking for the current situation, right? That's my assumption, right? And first of all, as I said before, funnily enough, it's still like a colonial time. Oh, probably I have to mention for my Iranian friends that the Ashura Day is a bank holiday or public holiday. That's something that remained from the colonial time. I mean, until my fieldwork was like that. Hopefully, it's still like it is the bank holiday. I'm not sure because of the new political developments. And that's the first thing. So the Ashura Day is a bank holiday, and they still have to apply for the license. And obviously, the community leaders are involved with that. So, and then this is like for the procession to even set up the temporary stalls and everything, they have to negotiate with the municipality, right? And that's why, as I said, that the Wahhabis are involved in that sense, because they have to negotiate with the local authority to get the permission. That's a kind of negotiation among the community, at the same time negotiation with the the authority, local authority, including municipality and the police regulator, all kind of things. So it's quite interesting. They are always involved with these things. And in the case of, for example, the Boras is a more complex situation because they're moving their ritual from place to place, and even city to city, even country to country. It has something to do with their own diaspora landscape, but diaspora network. But Mumbai since 19th century was their own, let's say, call it the cultural capital. So most of the year, the ritual is take place in Mumbai.
Thank you. The next question is from Nandini. With reference to Hindu participation in Muharram processions, you show the ward-wise police permissions were given in areas with no mosques. By the mid-19th century to late 19th century, F and G and E wards had already become strongly working-class wards. Since the Hindu communities were also distinct in class, caste, community, regional terms, and often spatially segregated, who were these Hindu groups or committees requesting permission in the wards?
Yeah, I mean, I have to mention that the Hindu community involved with the Muharram, they've been often lower caste. That was typical. I mean, we have all historical, basically records that not the upper caste have been involved. However, at the same time, I have to say that we have extremely unusual cases across the Indian subcontinent. Even we have a committee, probably you heard of it, is called Husseini Baraman, which is obviously the Baraman, but they associate themselves with the Imam Hussein, which has own mythical story. So this is not always the lower caste involved, but that was predominantly the case. But we also have the cases in certain part of India that the upper caste being involved with the processions.
Thank you. Next questions from Shivani. Of all the materials you worked with, including maps and archival images, is there a particular method that surprised you in terms of what is revealed about the procession's evolution?
Sorry, I didn't properly get the actual questions. Can you say it again?
So of all the materials you've worked with, including maps and archival images, is there something specific that surprised you in terms of what it revealed about the procession's evolution?
Yes, yeah. I mean, if I look at the 19th century, one of the surprising point was the procession wasn't past the Jama Mosque. If I show you, obviously they are, I mean, quite interesting. And let me move back to the map. Yeah. Can you, let me see, let me share my screen again. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
What is interesting, I mean, obviously I couldn't go through so much details, right? But this is Jama Mosque or Friday Mosque. You can see the procession. Obviously, people, they are coming from all over the place, join the main route, right? But you can see the main route wasn't go through like the shortest path, right? They just move around and pass the famous market in Mumbai, where actually most of Europeans went to the second floor watching the procession, and which was quite interesting. But again, I have to admit that in my own work in Iranian city, I shows that the procession often not taking the shortest path, but they often use a path to engage with different community and interrupt the everyday situation as much they could, right? That's a part of it. So the route of the procession often is not the shortest path from the beginning to the destination. This is the way that they try to suspend the city as much they could. But still, I was quite struck with to see why the Friday Mosque was not a part of the procession route. That's quite interesting. That's one of the things that I was surprised, I have to say.
Wow. As Mumbai continues to densify and redevelop, what are the aspects of Muharram processions that are at the risk of being lost? And is there anything new that is arising out of these urban transformations?
Okay, let me show you one map and I'll explain a couple of things here. Let me go back because I put too many material, but I knew obviously I can't, but I'll keep some material here that just in case if somebody asks me. The one of the new surprising dimension, obviously, that's the one that I mentioned, which is the engagement of Wahhabis. This is quite interesting and unusual, right? And let me just share my screen again. Can you see the map?
Yes.
This is the obviously the main part of Mumbai, and this is the obviously even beyond Mumbai, right? Like that part here is, I'm not sure how many of people are from Mumbai, but this is Mumbai, which is practically is outside of Mumbai, right? But you can take the train to that area, and there is a Shia community here. But my point is here, the Muharram, and that's Bandra, that's Mahim Bay, that's Back Bay, and that's the main part of Bombay, and that's the old part of the city. The Muharram is practiced actually in many places now during during Muharram time. However, the final day, the Ashura day, is uniquely happen in the old city. They call it Makhsusi in Urdu, right? They say the Ashura day is Makhsusi Dongre. So no ritual will happen anywhere else. They're all coming down to the Dongre. However, there is an exception. This is Dharavi. Because Dharavi is quite interesting, because for my Iranian friends, I have to say, like, this is a slum, and typical slums, they are extremely excluded from the rest of the city. So it's a city within the city. And that's why the Muharram ritual in Dongri has own system and history and kind of interesting place, that's why I published a chapter on Dongri, sorry, on Dharavi, because what is happening, which is fascinating situation, they're running Muharram and Gan party in the same route to create conciliation among Hindu and Muslim. And funny thing is, although in Mumbai, the rest of Mumbai, the Muharram became Shia event, but in Dharavi, it still is inter-community. So the Sunni is also involved with the Muharram. But this Muharram is a kind of very Dharavi event. It has kind of separated from the city and has a quite interesting history and story. And that's another interesting point. But one of the things that I have to say, like, still Muharram in many Indian cities, is still inter-community ritual. At least the Sunnis are involved. But because of the negotiation in Mumbai, Mumbai has own set different rituals. So it became Shia ritual in comparison with the other Indian cities. So I hope that they answered kind of the question that he.
Yes, I think so. I think that also partially covers one of the other questions we received about Sunni rituals in Muharram in Mumbai.
I mean, I have to say, it's still there are a kind of Sunni assembly, but they are very marginalized, and they may looks like the Wahhabis, but they obviously they use different color, and they are not they don't want to interrupt the Shia rituals. However, they're not running any procession. They have a few assembly, just to respect the Muharram and respect the tragedy of Ashura. But the Wahhabis, obviously, they want to interrupt the Shia, and they don't want to respect the Ashura because of the teaching they have. But again, this is not about the religious agenda. This is about social agenda and negotiating with others.
Thank you. We can take one last question. We are at 8 p.m. here in India, so maybe with this, we'll wrap up the session. So the question is from Faraz. I wanted to ask you about your choice of geography or city. What made you look at Mumbai instead of Lucknow, which traditionally has a grander, more historical Muharram practice? I think it's a good question to end on.
Yeah. I think partly I just explained at the beginning. Obviously, almost all of my colleagues who work on Shia rituals or Shia culture, they obviously look at Lucknow or Hyderabad because that was the heart of Shia history, right? But for me, because I want to look at the Muharram within the urban studies and to see how the religious ritual was a part of cosmopolitan and urban process and change, Mumbai became more important than Lucknow. The other point that I mentioned, the Mumbai, this is usually understudied. Mumbai has a major role and agency on the Muslims movements and intellectual movements and reforms. Explaining, I mean, obviously I knew we don't have enough time, but there was I would look at the case of Aga Khan, because if in one of my publications I explained, if Aga Khan wasn't in Mumbai, probably the Ismaili reform won't happen. So because of the Mumbai was a place of very diverse community encounter each other, that was a kind of a platform for negotiation, and that created a kind of situation that they change and reform, and that makes it Mumbai as a very extreme, interesting, I would call it urban lab. I mean, I have to say, if somebody want to look at the history of Muharram ritual, obviously Lucknow and it became extremely important, but for me as an urbanist, Mumbai is far more interesting and far more complex case studies.